Words of Radiance by Brandon Sanderson. So I did an internet search because I remembered before ever picking this book up that it said that it had one of the highest ratings of any book on Goodreads. I checked to see if that was actually still true, and Goodreads is super hard to search, but I did find a list of 100 books and or stories that are rated 4.5 or higher with at least 100 ratings. And of those, Words of Radiance has a 4.75 rating, which is only, oddly enough, kind of bested by Calvin and Hobbes. So the question is, does Words of Radiance deserve this rating? So I haven't read Words of Radiance since early this year, I think January, and so I spent 4 hours reading the plot summary. So it all came back to me. So I wanted to start with the things that I don't like first. First of all, this is going to be a fully spoiler review. And second, if you are a huge fan of these aspects of the story, don't take me not liking it as a criticism of you liking it. First of all, the setting is the same as the previous book. And I know that we're continuing the story from the Way of Kings, and we weren't done with the Shattered Plains yet. Brandon doesn't have to worry about introducing a whole new world to us, so he can just spend more time actually making things happen, so that definitely helps. But the thing is that combined, these two books are about 2,000 something pages, which is more than most trilogies in total. We've only seen this one little thumb-sized part of this gigantic map other than the interludes. So I think that having the same setting as the Way of Kings actually does hurt this book a little bit, because for the first 3 parts of the book, the story really drags up until we get to that arena moment, which is, to me, the best moment in the entire book. There's definitely some interesting things that happen along the way, especially with Shallan, Adolin's duels before the arena. There is stuff happening, but overall, it's like a lot of meetings in another blob of a room. And so with us being in the same setting and also having rooms that feel like the same setting, it started to really drag. And I remember kind of being like, this book isn't living up to the hype. So I'm going to couple that with my next criticism, which is a common criticism across all Brandon's work. If you've watched any of my Brandon Sanderson videos on my channel, I really don't like the way that character growth or development is executed actually on the page. I think that his characters are extremely well crafted. I think that they grow in ways that are very logical and interesting. The way he outlines their growth, has their backstories all laid out, and it kind of teases it out to you. I do really like all of that, but I don't like how much time we actually spend with characters basically just taking long walks and thinking, or sitting in a carriage and thinking, and just kind of like rehashing all the same things constantly over and over again. Just not to say that they aren't actually thinking these things, but in so many other stories that are much more efficient with their exposition and just their narrative in general, we just have events happen, we see how they respond to it, and we can infer from those things what their growth is or how they've changed over time, rather than having them have to spell it out to us constantly. And I think that that really does bloat this book. All those things for the first 3 parts of the book, I think, really drag down the enjoyment of a lot of those thunderclap scenes. The next thing I want to talk about is Brandon's world building. I think that Brandon does incredible world building. There are people who could actually be Brandon Sanderson scholars because they are able to dive so deeply into the nuances of everything that's going on in his world. There are a couple of points I would make about Brandon's world building. If you've played the Elder Scrolls games or any RPG or anything like that, it feels like the lore that if you go pick up a book off a bookshelf and you open it up, and it's kind of just like an excerpt, and it'll mention names and places and eras that you don't actually know what they are. It just gets a little coy after a while. I cannot stand the chapter headings. And there's just references to people's names, and you're trying to guess who this is. Sometimes it matters, sometimes it seems not to matter, and it just gets really exhausting trying to see if this is important or not important. It's extremely interesting, don't get me wrong. I get that this is all interconnected, but I really don't like it being given to me that way. I'd rather it be through story or through song or dialogue. A good example of this is actually Wit. When he and Kaladin have the fleet running, I love that execution and how that gives us a piece of the world building. The same thing is later done in Oathbringer between Wit and Shallan. So I much prefer that way of world building. Last criticism I have is that the ending is too superhero-ish. I didn't like how it just basically became a big like Marvel action scene. I really don't want this series to end up being just like Avengers Endgame at the very end, where it's just all the characters assembled against all the enemies assembled, and we have a giant war that we know the good people are going to win. So I do think that the action was just a little too heavy in that scene, but I still enjoy it. It's just I would rather it be a little more condensed, a little less gratuitous in how much superhero action we're getting. All right, so now I want to get to what I really loved about this book. Number one is the arena scene. I think that is the best moment in the entire book because that is what I want these climaxes to be. Maybe a little bit bigger, but it's small, but it feels like all the stakes of the world are riding on that scene. And what was at stake was obviously Renarin, Adolin, and Kaladin's lives. And Renarin trying to be brave and help his brother, despite not necessarily having the skills or the equipment to do so. It was just a great character moment. It was one of the most badass things. The honor is dead, but I'll see what I can do line is just amazing. And it was just a really well-written battle scene. And next I want to talk about the reveals and all the interconnectivity. So I do think Brandon does a great job because he is an outliner of having all these threads that are not part of the world building. They're just part of people's stories. So with Shallan and her brother Halarin being the shard bearer that Kaladin killed to protect Amram. So with Kaladin realizing that he killed Shallan's brother, Amram having to confront Kaladin having to confront Amram, and having to confront Dalinar being friends with Amram. I love all that. I mean, that's like juicy. That's like, give me that tea, right? Another one that was really good is Moash with Roshon, Dalinar, Elhokar, and Kaladin. All of them being wrapped up together and all the way that their stories interlink, how that makes it very complex, and how that actually makes you understand Moash's point of view of things. And we get to see that he's motivated for a reason that we can fully understand that Moash has legitimate reason to be upset and to hate the Light Eyes. And so I really love that Brandon's amazing at setting those threads up and then tying them all together later. A few other great scenes were the chasm scene with Kaladin and Shallan. And then my second favorite scene from the entire book was actually the Kaladin speaking the third ideal scene, where basically he has temporarily killed Syl. He has no powers, he's already injured, and he goes and defends Elhokar, and because of that, because he basically fulfills his oath, he gets Syl back, explodes with light, has a shard blade, it gives you fucking chills. The only thing I hate about that scene, this is gonna be the last thing that I don't like. I don't like the cliche monologuing during action scenes. That also happens with Szeth later in the High Storms. It's egregiously bad here. Where Graves says, we should have seen this coming in the diagram. We were trying to separate you from Dalinar, but we didn't foresee this coming. This is so unrealistic. Like, he's a fucking Knight Radiant who just exploded with light and had a shard blade. You just saw him get healed from broken ribs, and you're gonna be like talking to him about the diagram and shit? Like, no. It would have been a perfect moment if not for that. So the question was, does it deserve its rating? Does it deserve to be rated over classics like The Lord of the Rings and things like that? It sets such high expectations. Like, to me, if you're gonna be one of the highest rated books of all time on Goodreads in the fantasy genre, then it should be a near flawless book. And I still think this book has a ton of flaws. I think all the Stormlight Archive has a ton of flaws. Even though the whole thing is still incredible, it blows my mind. Just reading this plot summary was so thrilling to go back and relive these moments, especially as quick as I did. I don't think that there's anybody who's better at crafting new worlds out of whole cloth that I've read. I just don't like the way he executes certain things. And that's a matter of taste. So for me, this book does not live up to its rating on Goodreads relative to other books. I do still think it's really good. I do still love the Stormlight Archive. I think that they are actually hurt by being a part of a 10-book series that's pretty much fully pre-planned because you can't view them as one book by themselves. So that's my 2 cents. So thank you guys for watching this video. Sorry if I ranted too much, but if you like this video, please consider liking the video by clicking the little like button. And think about subscribing and hitting the bell notifications so that every time I make a video, you'll get notified. And y'all have a great day.